Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thanks so much again for joining us for the State of the American Traveller, our very special destinations edition, looking at how, why, and where people travel. I'm going to kick it off here in just 30 seconds. We've got a very large number of people signed up, so we'll just give them 30 seconds or so. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. The State of the American Traveller since 2006 has been providing insights, critical takeaways, and understanding of how American travelers, leisure travelers, plan their travel. So the Destinations Edition looks at where, how, and why people travel in terms of destination selection. And I'm delighted to be joined by a couple of great colleagues. So Dave Bratton, a very familiar face. Dave, are you in San Francisco?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I'm in beautiful San Francisco today. It's a great day here.
Very good. No doubt you'll be popping out for a bike ride or something after this.
I hope so, yeah.
A wonderful colleague of mine, Lauren Fox, has been sort of behind the scenes on these webinars for the last 5+ years. Today, she joins us in front of the webinar camera. And so Lauren is our marketing manager, and she'll be sharing some of the wonderful content examples that we've pulled together from across our teams and from examples from around the world. So Lauren, are you in Sarasota?
I am, yes. I'm in Sarasota, Florida in our Miles office today.
Thank you so much for all the work that I know you and our colleagues at Miles put into pulling together these examples. So just a reminder before I'll pass over to Dave that the resources from today, the slide deck, the webinar recording, plus we're working on a 2-page summary of the research is going to be available online. You can see those web addresses right there. You can also dive into past editions of the Destinations Edition. And I mentioned before that State of the American Traveller was started in 2006 by Dave and Erin Francis Cummings, the President and CEO of Destination Analysts. We joined them in 2008, and ever since 2008, that's 14+ years, we've been working with, sponsoring and supporting one of the most impactful and important looks at American leisure travelers. And so we've got some wonderful insights again today. If you look at the agenda, Dave's going to be diving into first the impact of gas prices and inflation on traveler sentiment. Then he's pulled together insights around those decisions on where and how people decide to travel. We've actually also dove back into our library of past editions to compare some of our results from 2008 onwards. And then Lauren's going to be joining us with the content that inspires, these content examples from across our teams and from around the world of content that Destinations really do a wonderful job in terms of telling the story of that special place. We've got some additional resources at the end, some reminders of some of the other programs, projects, and upcoming webinars, and there'll be time for Q&A. So please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of Zoom there to submit any questions, or if in the chat box, if you've got additional suggestions or content or resources. So without further ado, Dave, let's have a look at the 2022 edition, the Destinations Edition of State of the American Traveller.
Thank you, Chris. Really great to be here with you all. For me, it's a little bit of a return to some semblance of normalcy. You know, as Chris said, we had been, if I can get this thing to move, sorry. Yeah, we've been doing the State of the American Traveller for a long, long time. And then this pandemic came along and it kind of made it outdated, like nobody was interested in what we were doing anymore, obviously, because The only thing we could think about for a couple of years was the coronavirus. So we at Destination Analyst shifted to a different survey every week for most of the pandemic, changed that to every 2 weeks. And now we're weaning ourselves off that drug and starting to reduce the amount of questions we ask about coronavirus and moving back to the more traditional State of the American Traveler approach. And we're doing it every month. So this is a much bigger project now than we've ever done. 4,000 fully completed surveys of a net representative sample of American travelers every month. And the data I'm going to show you today comes from March 15th to 23rd, a few weeks ago when we collected it. So we have a lot more power with a big sample like that. So let's talk first about inflation because it's on everyone's mind right now. And I know we live in one of the great democracies of the world, and as such, we're going to argue about things and try to tell stories that fit our political agenda. And one of the things I've seen lacking in the media is like a more comprehensive discussion of what's really going on with inflation. And in my view, it's a lot of stuff happening simultaneously, like a perfect storm of different things. These include a rapid growth in the money supply, a lot of government spending, a lot of loose fiscal policy, monetary policy. And you can see it here in this chart, which shows the M2 money supply and the beginning of the pandemic. And there's this huge shift in the rate of growth in the money supply. So a lot more dollars out there chasing goods. In addition, we've of course had the much talked about disruptions in the supply chain, not only boats, but trains, you name it, all sorts of stuff going on there. And of course, our labor markets have been in turmoil. Fewer people working, able to work, nobody's been hit harder than the tourism industry, increasing prices and also wages going up to accommodate that, making the cost of goods and services being more expensive. Of course, there's been profit taking as well, profiteering, whatever you want to call it. And of course, then we have our war in Europe, which has done a real number on energy prices. So all of that combined has got the world in kind of an uproar right now. And right now, when we ask on an 11-point scale from being extremely concerned to not at all concerned, how concerned are you about inflation affecting your financial well-being? The vast majority of travelers, 70.9%, say that they have some elevated level of concern. 1 out of 5 are extremely concerned about it. And the interesting thing as we dug into this is we see that it's across many, many types of travelers. It just seems to be permeating society as a whole. By generation, there's not a whole lot of difference. By region of the country, not a whole lot of difference. By ethnicity, not a whole lot of difference. If we look at place of residence, whether you live in an urban area or a rural area, not a lot of difference. Family status, with kids, without, both levels are equally concerned, more or less. And sexual orientation even, there's very little difference in how people are feeling about it in terms of that level of concern about this is something that's going to affect their financial well-being potentially. 2 areas where there are big differences though. Household income, you can see on the left here that the higher the household income, the less likely they are to be concerned about it affecting their well-being financially. Still, more than half of people with incomes over 200K say that they have that concern right now. And of course, by political affiliation, as you would expect, people who identify as Republican are more concerned than Democrats. So what does that tell us? Well, we asked this question about how much do you agree with this statement? Recent inflation will likely cause me to rethink my budgets for upcoming travel. And we see that most travelers, almost 56%, say that, yeah, this is probably going to make me rethink how I'm budgeting out my travel. Very few people disagree with that statement, only 1 in 5. So it's on our minds. And if we look at that a little further, we see that same story, like by generation, it's the same, by region, it's the same. But again, when we get down to household income, the richer you are, basically, the less likely you think you're going to have to rethink your budgets for upcoming travel. But still 40% of that group feels that they're going to have to be rethinking this. Gasoline prices are driving all this, of course, with the rapid increase in energy prices. We see it at the pump. Everyone's complaining about it and talking about how much a gallon of gas costs. And we ask another agreement statement. If gasoline prices don't come down, I'll be taking fewer trips in the summer. And most travelers say that's the case. 60% are looking to summer travel. And unfortunately, the average trip in America is planned about 11 weeks in advance. So people right now are planning their summer travel, right? And they're thinking, okay, it's going to be expensive. And a big chunk of them are thinking they'll take fewer trips this year. Only 15.9% disagree with that statement. Will they be staying closer to home? Yeah, 59.8% say they agree with that statement, that if prices don't come down, they're going to stick closer to home. Very few reject that statement. And overall, you know, almost 2 out of 3 travelers feel that travel prices right now are just too high. And as a result of that, about a third, 31.9%, have actually traveled less than they'd like to in the past month as a result of pricing. So how does that look moving forward? We ask a similar question here. Recent inflation in consumer prices had led me to cancel an upcoming trip. So right now, 24.7% of American travelers say that they've actually canceled a trip that's coming up because of the inflation in prices that they're seeing. Half have not, you know, a quarter are neutral on this scale, but basically 1 out of 4 travelers say they've pulled the plug on an upcoming trip. Let's look at that a little bit, because who has actually canceled the trip is quite interesting. Very few older people have. It seems to be focused in the younger generations right now. And by region, people in the West and the South are more likely to say that they've canceled a trip. Household income, same story, that high income families less likely to. Interestingly, and I have no explanation for this, but people living in large cities are way more likely to say they've canceled a trip, an upcoming trip, than people in suburban or rural areas. I'd love to hear your theories on that if you have any. And additionally, people with children of school age are more likely to have pulled the plug right now on an upcoming trip. So obviously it's super important. We're starting to see the pinch in the industry. People are, you know, stopping their travel. Well, how are we feeling financially? One of the interesting things about this, our sense of financial wellness is pretty solid. I'm going to show you 4 stats here, basically, that show that we're feeling pretty good about things. When we ask, are you better off or worse off than you were a year ago? 34.5% feel they are. Not that many feel the other way, that they're feeling worse off. And you can see we've been asking this for a little over a year now in our surveys. Not a lot of change going on in that. So financial status seems okay. Is now a good time to spend money on travel? Well, 37.8% say yeah. And if we look at that over the same period of time, we're down a little bit in this wave by a few percentage points, but considering the last several months, it's not that much of an anomaly. In terms of having travel as a budget priority in their family budgets, 61% say it's going to at least be somewhat of a high priority in the next year. And again, this is actually looks like it's edging up a bit as we move through the year. And finally, when we ask, well, what's their maximum travel budget for the next 12 months? The average this last wave was $4,080. And you can see that this is not, again, moving in a negative direction that might make us think that there are things beyond inflation financially that are going to be affecting the industry as a whole. So Chris had some thoughts he wanted to share at this point.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this blog, Dave, which looked at this issue of gas prices and the impact of the Ukrainian war on the psyche of the American traveler. It looks at some of the analysis Dave has shared and also identifies 6 critical recommendations for destination marketing organizations, such as shifting to a focus on shorter drive markets. There are going to be opportunities around the continuing benefits of international travel substitution. People perhaps who might have planned to go to Europe because of the uncertainty in Eastern Europe might be thinking about domestic holidays, and affordability and having a value proposition critically important. So check that blog out. But back to you, Dave.
Yeah, check it out. Okay. So let's move on and talk about travel in 2022 and where we're at. And some good news is that travelers are more excited now than we've seen in a long, long time to get out and travel. On our 11-point scale from not at all excited to 10 being extremely excited. How excited are you to travel this year? well, 80.1% are at an elevated level. And if we look at the average, we take the mean score for that 11 points and look at it over the last year or so, we can see that we are at a pandemic record high. Things definitely good in terms of travelers feeling like they're excited to get out and travel. And, you know, the last couple of years, we've kind of talked about how this is the time of the beach and the outdoor destination. And I think what we're going to see this year is it's the year of connection. When we look at the different types of trips that people are excited to take on a similar 11-point scale, you can see that the trip we're most excited to take as a country is the family trip. But look at all the other ones I've highlighted in orange here: romantic getaways, girlfriend trips, multi-family trips, multi-couple trips, blah, blah, blah. All trips with the primary purpose of getting together with other people, extremely high right now. So we're going to be getting out. We're excited to get out, and we want to get together as well. When we ask about what level of priority each of these different experiences you have when you travel are, number one, spending time with the people we love. Similarly, when we tested the higher priorities that people are looking for this year, just having fun and relaxing are at the top. This isn't something that you would think would be different from a normal year, but certainly there's a high interest out there in the connection levels of travel. Okay, let's talk about destinations and where people want to travel this year. And we ask a question in this survey, and we use a scale from love it to hate it, and ask them, well, look at these different types of destinations, and what do you generally love or hate? How do you feel about each? So number one, in terms of the percent that say they love it or like it, are the beach destinations, small towns and rural villages, national parks, mountains, state, county, regional parks, and then cities. So cities are quite a way down there right now in terms of our love-hate it index. When we ask a similar question about excitement to travel, and this story is really interesting, I think, because we've been tracking this over a number of years. And you can see that right now, Americans are most excited to travel to beach destinations and resorts. 54.0% gave it a 10, 9, or an 8 on our 11-point excitement scale. All of the other ones are somewhat more subdued here. But let's look at this over time. And you can see here the results for the same question asked in 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And then a break until we resumed this survey, this last wave. And you can see where the pandemic started. And this is the general level of excitement amongst American travelers in terms of visiting beach destinations this year, and cities and metro areas. Both are down from pre-pandemic levels, but look at how much further down cities are compared to that. I'm going to fly in 3 more for you to compare here, which really didn't change that much. These are national parks, small towns, villages, rural destinations, and mountain destinations and resorts. If you look at that from the pandemic's beginning to now, they've not changed a whole lot. Certainly nothing compared to what we see in the red line with the cities or metro areas. One more to fly in here, we see theme parks and desert destinations and resorts. Again, both down a little bit, but not substantial like we see for cities here. And Chris has some thoughts on this too he'd like to share as well.
Yeah, just some of the forward-looking booking data out of Airbnb and also Adara paints, a more optimistic picture in terms of the recovery of cities. So certainly there are some challenges all over the world in terms of getting workers, for example, back into urban areas. The whole remote working phenomenon is also impacting urban environments, but of course that can go both ways. So some unique challenges, but cities time and time again over history have shown they've got incredible resilience and creativity to solve these sorts of challenges.
Yeah. You know, Chris, we've always seen in this survey that the cities were the most visited by volume and by number of trips by a mile. And I was just actually speaking to Erin on the phone earlier today, who's in New York City, and she was saying she's never seen the city that busy. So
yeah,
that's great
news. I think it speaks, Dave, to what you just shared, the desire of people to connect with each other. So, yeah. And of course, cities are a unique and special place to do exactly that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, So where do we want to go? Well, we ask an open-ended question with 5. You could write in the 5 destinations you most want to visit in America in the next 12 months. And we see number 1 is New York City. 17% of people wrote in New York, followed by Florida, Vegas, California, Hawaii, and so on. My beloved San Francisco has taken a dive here. We're down to 2.6. Traditionally, it would have been quite a bit higher on this. So it's not a lot of cities, actually, we've seen a retreat here in this number for the time being. And then we followed this question. Actually, let me go back. We followed this question up with another question where if you answered, New York in this question, what we did is we went for the next question and we said something like this. Okay, on the last page you said you'd like to visit New York in the next 12 months. Which of the following are reasons you want to visit New York in the next 12 months? So what you see here are the answers for all destinations that were written into that top slot in the survey. And the number 1 reason people are excited to go to a place, Americans are excited to go to a place this year, is that their friends or family are there. So again, that connection thing coming up. They will visited before, they want to return is a biggie. General atmosphere, food and cuisine, water sports, adventure, and so on. Now, very different segments look at this differently, and I just want to share one, which is going to make sense to you, I think, but it's interesting to me at least. Friends or relatives are there. Who wants to most strongly connect with their friends and relatives right now by this metric? Well, older people. 40% of boomers basically said that was the reason they want to go to that place. Much lower for Gen Z over on the left. Visited and want to return. Again, boomers. Gen Z millennial may not have had as much life experience in travel. They may be wanting to visit new places or whatever, but they also want adventure. If you see here, the younger travelers are much more interested in these destinations for the adventurous experiences that they can have here. So again, when you look at these big top line data for the industry, understand that underlying it, there are all sorts of stories that are of interest. Okay, let's talk about COVID for just a minute. And one of the things we wanted to kind of look into is how people have changed their thinking or their feelings as a result of these 2 nightmare years we've been living through. Before we ever saw this horrible image on the left, we wanted to get in people's heads and say, well, when did you feel, how did you feel then, and how do you feel now? Okay, so think of yourself now compared to how you were 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. In the questions below, please tell us how, if at all, you've changed, okay? So I'm going to share you a series of these, share with you a series of these. Number 1 is compared to before the pandemic, I am blah motivated to travel. And we can see that people are much more motivated to travel now than they were before the pandemic. You know, if you take something away from, I keep telling people this, you take something away from a human, they want it more and more. And this thing we love, this travel, has been taken away from us in many, many ways. And people really want to get out and do it right now. As you can see, very few feel like they're less interested in travel at this point or less motivated to travel. In terms of length of trip, you know, some are going to take longer trips, some are going to take shorter trips. Overall, a bit of a wash in terms of the amount of time they expect to be out on the road. But changing the distance of the trip, 32% feel they'll be traveling closer to home than at the end of the, or beginning of the pandemic, before it. Only 13% feel they'll be venturing out further from home. So there's a sentiment that, okay, let's keep it a little closer. In terms of how much care they're going to take in planning their trip, this one's very striking. 46.5% feel they're going to be more careful in planning their trip now than they would have been before a pandemic. The pandemic, only 3% feel they'll be less careful. You know, throw caution to the wind, I guess. And then urban travel, similar story in terms of it's kind of a wash between those that feel they're more likely to travel to urban areas or less likely to, less interested, to do so. So not a lot of change there, but look at this next one. Outdoor oriented destinations. 42.4% feel they're much more interested in visiting outdoor destinations than they were before the pandemic. And this is, you know, who knows whether this is going to be a long lasting effect. but it's something we've been wondering about and trying to find ways to wrap our mind around, whether this new experience of being outdoor that a lot of people are having now, being forced to do so by the pandemic, is that going to have a long lasting effect on outdoor destinations and people's desire for them? So far it looks like maybe, at least for a while. So okay, let's talk about our international trips. And one of the things we've been doing on our survey, which I really enjoy, is asking people about what they're passionate about. What is it that really moves you? And we give them a long list of different things and ask people to evaluate their personal passions in life. I'm going to show you the top 10 passions that American travelers have now. And you can see number one is food and cuisine. I guess no surprise there. Historical sites and attractions is very high as well, followed by shopping and then international travel. So of the many, many different passions we've been measuring, number 4 on the list is going outside of America. So American travelers are into it in terms of going abroad. They love the idea. And it's always fun to do focus groups and stuff and talk to people because they just, everybody's thinking about going abroad, it seems like. However, the pandemic's gotten in the way of that. We've asked this question since the start of the pandemic. How much do you agree with the statement, I'll be unlikely to travel outside the US until the situation with the virus is resolved? And about half of us still feel that way. But you can see this is moving down pretty sharply over recent waves of our survey. So people are feeling more open to traveling abroad than they've been for a long, long time. And in fact, 29.6% of travelers say they're very likely or likely to go outside the US this year. So 1 out of 3 of us, it's going to be looking outside the country. And where do they want to go? Well, in the next 3 years, we asked where they were likely to travel, and Europe is top, followed by Canada, the Caribbean, Mexico, and then a number of other regions down lower. So I'm sorry about your Australia, New Zealand, Chris, being that low. If you haven't been to New Zealand, you should go. It's the most beautiful of places.
Thanks, mate. But there's
Yes.
a lot of Air New Zealand starting a flight direct to New York City and
Is that
resuming all their other services. So there's lots of connectivity already on stream. So
well, if you New Yorkers haven't been there, you should get on a plane because it's a glorious place. Okay, so again, the 5 places you'd most like to visit in the next 12 months are shown here, with Canada and Italy being the top, followed by France and Paris, written out separately, Mexico, Japan, and Ireland. So we have a lot of different aspirations. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this presentation by talking about travel planning. How are they choosing the destinations that they want to go to? And how are they planning their trips? And we've reinstituted a lot of questions that we asked before. And I think it's a pretty interesting story here. In terms of offline resources, from print magazines to direct mail pieces, you see in front of you the proportion of travelers that say they have used each in the past year. And remember, this is during the pandemic when travel was down, so naturally these numbers should be suppressed. Overall, 40.1% have used one of these offline resources in the past year. In terms of a variety of online resources, from articles and blogs down to newspaper travel sections on websites, we see a similar story, with 61% of travelers using at least one of these during the past year to plan their trip. Social media to plan travel. And I just want to call out one thing here. Over on the left, you see, please only check if used for travel planning ideas or inspiration. So we're really clear in this survey and all these questions that we only want you to answer it if you used it for travel planning. 1 out of 4 said Facebook. Only 1% said Quora. But overall, about 41.5% said they'd use some form of social media channel to plan their trips in the past year. And then DMO resources, 21% the website and so on down the line here. Overall, about 40%, a little under 40% of travelers said they'd reached out to a DMO for planning information during the past year. This is kind of a fun one here, just a list of magazines that people have read or paged through, either printed or online in the past year. You can see at the top, AARP magazine, Travel and Leisure, People magazine. And overall, 57% of travelers say that they have reached out, they have used a print or looked through a print one of these print magazines in the past year. Now, keep in mind, this is the top 30 magazines by circulation lots and lots of other print guides out there. So this 57% is undoubtedly a low estimate of total use of print. So, and just for fun, I took a look at some of the magazines, and I got my start in market research working at a magazine, and it was a real revelation to me how much they knew about their readership and how focused it was on a certain person. So don't forget that as you evaluate this list. Just for example, AARP, 20% of boomers have looked at the AARP bulletin in the past year. 1% of Gen Zers, and I don't know what's wrong with those kids, but then we have Game Informer on the other end, which is a young person's magazine. 0.2% of boomers, I guess some of them play games, but you can see a huge difference between those, and I think Game Informer was the third most circulated magazine last year, something like that. So big differences there. If I can get this to move. People magazine, fairly even across incomes. You see here, doesn't matter what income you are, you have a similar likelihood to be picking up a People magazine and reading about Kim Kardashian. But Travel and Leisure, you can see, is much more focused towards a higher end audience in terms of annual income. Okay, where do we get our destination inspiration? Well, primarily from our friends and relatives, opinions and friends and relatives. We ask, well, where do you get your inspiration for where you go? Followed by online media, travel content you find on the internet. And then down below, 1 out of 4 say social media, friends and relatives that share their stuff there. So of course the story is, word of mouth. We know that's always been the case, how we learn about this stuff. But let's just look at a little change here from 2019 to now, from pre-pandemic to now. We see that a few of these have moved down. Opinions of friends and relatives have dropped a bit, online media down a bit, and offline media down a bit. Where we've seen a change, though, which is interesting, in the positive direction, more people seeing their destination selection being influenced by social media content from friends and relatives, and also online video, which I don't think should surprise anyone given how great that content has become. And I want to give Miles some kudo for that, because they've been pushing us for a long time to study online video and its penetration, and it seems to be moving in that direction. So, okay, another chart. This one's going to show 3 variables, and you may have seen this before if you've been with us over the years. The first variable you see at the top, and this is how important people feel each resource type is to how they select the places they visit. And the bigger the ball, the higher the importance of the resource. The smaller the ball, the less important it is. As you move up the vertical axis here, it means more trust. So the higher we're going to be up on this chart, the more they trust that resource. And as we move to the right, the more often they use it, the more frequently they use it when they're planning their trip. So let's look at this. And first I'm going to fly in the 3 most used, most trusted, and most important travel planning resources. And you can see their relatives in person, friends in person, and then review websites. But you see review websites are much less trusted than our word of mouth from your friends and relatives. Let me bring in a whole bunch more, and they're going to fall out on this left at lower levels of use, lower levels of trust, lower levels of importance. And you can see everything here from hotel staff and concierge to podcasts and audio files being the least used, least trusted, and probably least important of all these. Now, you may notice there's kind of a hole in the middle, and you probably have guessed that what goes there are DMO resources. I've colored them all pink here so they'd stand out. You can see the print guides, visitor information centers after arriving in a destination, or DMO websites here. So clearly DMOs have a big chunk or important spot in this ecosystem of resource usage. Now, I want to show you where we were a few years ago. And what you're going to see, this is the same chart that we did before the pandemic. What you're going to see is everything kind of moves down and to the left a little bit. Overall, the relative shape of this doesn't change a lot, but let me just put it here. This is 2018. I'll go back to now, right? 2018, now. 2018, oops, sorry. That kind of ruins that for you, doesn't it? But you can see that we've moved down on most of these to lower level of trust, little lower level of usage. But overall, the ecosystem seems fairly stable in terms of the orientation of all these on our chart. So, okay. Finally, let's talk about receptivity to learning about new destinations. We gave them a list of resources and said, well, where would you be most receptive to learning about a new place? And number one is websites found on search engines, followed by online content, articles and blogs, Facebook, email, and so on down the list. And again, one of the more interesting ways always to look at this is by generation. So let's do that. And you're going to see a big difference in the picture here. Gen Z is shown here. Their top 4 or 5, excuse me, streaming video, Instagram, online content, Facebook, and TikTok. Nearly 1 in 4, nearly 1 in 5, excuse me. Gen Zers say that TikTok is a place they'd be most receptive to learning about a place. Let's move on down to millennials. Facebook, websites, streaming video services, online content, and Instagram for the millennial audience. Gen X, websites, online contact, Facebook, email rears its head. An official state visitor guide, 16% said that's where they would be one of the places they'd be most open to learning about destinations. And finally, baby boomers, websites, official state visitor guides, number 2, email, traveler lifestyle magazines, printed, and then online content and blogs. So you see a very different picture as we move through the generations here in terms of what they feel they would be, where they feel they'd be receptive to learning about destinations to visit. So good food for thought as you start planning where you're going to be putting your money. And Chris has some more thoughts here.
So Dave, I just wanted to highlight a publication we've been doing with your wonderful research for many, many years. The Hyper-Informed Traveller summarizes many of these trends. We're going to be updating it in the next month or so with 2021 data. But that looks at these shifts over a long period of time. And as you've discussed, we've seen during the pandemic an impact in terms of both usage and even trust, which perhaps speaks to some of those wider issues. But an incredibly fragmented, complex media landscape. So it really emphasizes the importance of your content and campaign strategy, thinking very broadly about how do you reach potential travelers or current travelers through, a very complex multimedia landscape. And Dave, I think let's just go to a couple of questions before we pass over to Lauren for those content examples. A wonderful old familiar colleague, Helen Morano, is asking about what degree these issues, like just yesterday in New York City in terms of the subway attack, and of course there's been news stories about Californian cities in terms of homelessness, etc. What has your research shown in terms of how that, the news cycle impacts people's perception of a destination and likelihood to travel there?
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion on that, Chris. I think the shorter term effects of something like what happened in New York are probably small, and longer term effects non-existent. However, cities like my city, San Francisco, has been part of a ongoing conversation nationally about homelessness and crime and things like that. And it's very clear that that has taken a toll on the city's brand, how people see it. So I'm not sure that one-off events are going to have much effect, but when you have a national conversation that's, I'm just going to be nice about it, but that people are saying things about a place that are very negative and oftentimes very ill-founded, it does have an effect on how people look at the place. And we've clearly seen that with San Francisco, that it's been hurt by that conversation. So,
yeah. And I differentiate the news and I suppose media coverage from the actual experiences. Your research highlights the incredible power, enduring power of word of mouth, traditional word of mouth. People who've gone to a place, experienced it, sharing. That's obviously going to be a lot more impactful. And so that sort of research and understanding of how visitors experience a place and what they're likely to share with their friends and family hugely important. But yeah, certainly the news cycle, so many things today, it does seem to be more partisan, which can have broader impacts. Okay, so just a reminder, we've got some additional comments and questions. I'll come back to Dave and Lauren at the end. You can use the Q&A tab or the chat feature. But without further ado, let's pass over to Lauren. And Lauren and our team of content strategists, interactive producers, and others across our various accounts have pulled together examples of destinations that we work with and destinations well beyond that in terms of both across North America and globally. So Lauren, what is the content that's inspiring in 2022?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, as Dave highlighted with the research, Americans want to travel and they're ready to travel again. Knowing that people are more motivated to travel and are reprioritizing travel and different experiences, having content that highlights these in a destination can help appeal to audiences looking for something they might not have before. So we're going to go through some examples of destinations and organizations doing that well already. One of the top priorities that Dave mentioned right now for people traveling is to spend time with families and loved ones. And Destin Fort Walton Beach, for example, curated a hub on their site called Little Adventures, where they offer, as they say, bite-sized adventures for the whole family. And what I really like about this example is the ability to filter by ages and trip length so that families can personalize the content they see to their specific family needs. From dolphin excursions to fishing off the island pier, this is a one-stop place full of content for families to plan out activities and adventures for everyone to enjoy, and includes all the details they need to know for their excursions. And when we're talking about family experiences, we also mean for your furry family members too. Over the last year, searches for dog-friendly hotels increased by 50%. People want to travel, and like myself, they want to bring their pets along too. Serrata Beach Resort here in St. Pete Beach, Florida, already offered pet-friendly rooms and even lucky dog menu for their special dog guest. But they saw these shifts as an opportunity to do more to reach this growing audience and developed a pet-friendly campaign to do so. So with new pet-friendly content on their page includes an optimized landing page with engaging content, videos, and a pet travel FAQ. This content was deployed through paid and organic social posts, helping to spread the word while also increasing social engagement across their channels by encouraging guests to share pictures of their beloved pups on their stay. To date, site entrances through the pet-friendly accommodations page increased by 307%, making it one of the most valuable site pages to draw new visitors in, and Serrata is up 137% in online revenue. Following experiences with family members, another great experience that people are looking for are new destinations or new experiences in destinations they already know. As we were pulling together examples for this section, our team came across this beautiful site for Chania Tourism Bureau, a city on the northeast side of the Greek island of Crete. And while a lot of us hadn't heard of this specific city before, we all definitely know about it now, and it's on our must-visit list for the future. The site's content, both visual and written, is full of personality and does a great job illustrating the beauty, history, stories, and experiences of the destination. Beyond travelers visiting a brand new place or attracting new visitors to your destination, there's also an opportunity to reach repeat visitors with new experiences they might not have had before. While the St. Pete Clearwater area is known for its beautiful beaches, and I myself frequent them quite often on the weekends, Visit St. Pete Clearwater wanted to establish more of an awareness around the destination's arts and culture scene. By partnering with Atlas Obscura, they were able to add permanent entries into the atlas, create a curated custom list of the art scene in the area, sponsor social posts that you see here, and have an ad on the Atlas Obscura podcast. This helped them to not only reach repeat visitors and help them make a connection between the destination and the arts, but it also gave Visit St. Pete Clearwater a platform to reach Atlas Obscura's broader audience base who are attracted to these kind of experiences, cultural travel, and unique offerings. And another example that you might have seen recently, New York City recently launched the Get Local NYC campaign, aimed at encouraging visitors to explore all of New York City and its 5 boroughs, and support the small businesses and local experiences within each. Each borough has a landing page full of ideas with restaurants, attractions, hotels, and tours. The campaign wants visitors to see the boroughs like a New Yorker, and they created these Get Local NYC ads that will start appearing digitally in regional and national markets in the future, in addition to all of the online content they have available and planned. One of the top ranked priority experiences that Dave mentioned earlier is enjoying nature and the great outdoors. And we all know that natural areas have seen a definite spike in visitation over the last 2 years. A great example of showcasing content, outdoor content actually, is the original series Venturing Out Park to Park, produced by our Odyssey Studio here at Miles. The series encourages people to venture out and promotes the accessibility and ease at which people can explore the outdoors. Season 1 features different destinations, including Grand Junction, Colorado, Wilmington, Delaware, Asheville, North Carolina, El Paso, Texas, and Tucson, Arizona. And the episodes show different outdoor adventures and one-of-a-kind experiences that can be had at each. And we saw some unprecedented results with season 1, more than 39.6 million episode views across the 3 distribution platforms, and more than 5.3 million digital and social impressions. And now season 2 is underway, and we're excited to see what's in store for the series next. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, it is available now on places.travel, Outside TV, and Trip Scout. So you can check it out as soon as we get off this webinar. Another great example is Travel Manitoba, who fully embraces the sub-zero climate that they have and highlights the cold weather activities of their destination. The Winter Explorer guide they have is full of outdoor experiences perfectly catered for the destination's average winter temperature of -12 degrees Celsius. So, just a little bit more brisk than it is here in Sarasota today. They're also a DMO that is very active on TikTok. This breathtaking video that you see here featuring the Northern Lights experience has been seen nearly 16,000 times in just a short period of time. And viewers' comments on the video range from being in awe of its beauty, adding it to their destination bucket list like myself, and for others, reminiscing about the last time they saw the Northern Lights themselves. And that's why people travel and consume travel content, to be inspired to travel and feel a certain way when they do. Explore Boone is one destination that doubled down on this emotional side of travel by focusing their campaign messaging around something that was uniquely theirs, the ability to inspire awe. The campaign's creative captured individuals being in awe of Boone's many inspiring landscapes through digital display ads, native ads, social media, and out-of-home placements. Boone was able to develop and deploy award-winning content that not only showed a strong brand presence throughout the marketplace, it also helped spark Boone's most successful ski season in years. One final example of a destination's content that aims to make you feel a certain way is Chattanooga. And Chattanooga refuses to let you feel like a tourist. The powerful sense of community at the heart of the Chattanooga brand is embodied in this campaign. It's One of Us campaign wants you to feel and experience the city like a local. The campaign's imagery shows the welcoming nature of the destination by reflecting the city's diversity in a lighthearted and inspiring way. And we know that there are a lot of other examples and destinations and brands sharing inspiring content as well beyond what we just showed today. So if you have any other examples you'd like to share, let us know and feel free to drop them in the chat. And Chris, I will pass it back to you to wrap us up for today.
Thanks a lot, Lauren. Yeah, some wonderful examples there that I'm sure have got us all inspired about our travel planning in 2022 and beyond. Just some additional resources before we come to a few questions. A reminder, we've actually revamped our State of the American Traveller section of our site. So you can more easily find both today's webinar slides, recording, resources, etc., but also past editions. And remember, the Destinations edition is one of 4 quarterly editions. And so we'll be following up with the Technology edition in Q2, our Traveller Segments edition in Traveller 3, and our Destination Management edition in the Q4, all with incredible insights. These are special editions of the State of the American Traveller that, as we've talked about now, has a long and storied history. Just some other quick resources before we pass over. I mentioned the blog on the impact of gas prices and the war. We've also got a whole range of other rich blog content to dive through. Yours truly just actually is back from Bangladesh. We were working on a really fascinating international project with USAID in their Sundarbans region, World Heritage Site, tigers, incredible amount of profuse wildlife in one of the most populated countries on earth. So it's a real privilege to try and help out the people of Bangladesh and work with USAID and our friends at Solomar and the other partners in that really important project. And I also just want to highlight a couple of weeks ago, our colleague Andrea Wood was with actually David from Destination Analysts, Simon from NEAR, presented at DMA West Tech Summit. They looked at destination decisions specifically for Western DMOs, and there's a lot of really rich examples and insights. So if you're in the west of the country, please check out those resources available at that web address. We've just kicked off yesterday one of the most impactful and important studies we've ever been involved in. This is a global study looking at how to build successful and enduring partnerships with local residents, businesses, and other community groups. It's called Time for Democracy. We're working with our very good friends across Europe on this, as we have on other previous projects. We're delighted to have 20 very real leaders in terms of being destinations, both across major cities, states and provinces, and our mountain and coastal DMOs. There's going to be 6 learning labs, a whole series of other events in terms of research, understanding how destinations around the world are tackling resident and community engagement. And at the end of the process, we'll be defining best practices. 22 European destinations are part of this. So there's going to be really some impactful insights coming out of this whole process, and we'll be sharing some of the top line results publicly so all DMOs can take advantage of what is a very pressing and important issue. Just here in a week or so, we've got this very impactful webinar coming up, the Rise of Value-Based Marketing. So our team's going to be sharing some of the latest examples of how to tell the story of your brand and destination through content, particularly in terms of ensuring that that content is inclusive and tells the full story of your destination. So let's just go on to a couple of questions. So another very familiar face here, Wendy Keel Day was asking about Generation Z. So we've looked at that, I know, in the Traveller Segments edition. Wendy was asking, is there any evidence that influencers have sort of declined in terms of their popularity with Gen Z or other types of travelers?
Yeah, I think the story that we're seeing is there's been some decline. I can't speak specifically to Gen Z though. I don't have that right in front of me, Chris. So I'd have to go look at that. And I'm not sure that we have enough data to make that assertion. But Wendy, I'll look that up for you. And sorry, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, certainly we'll be looking at that more closely, Wendy, in our Traveller Segments edition in Q3. We've seen the rise of streaming content. Do you have any sense from the research, Dave, of which major channels are most important in terms of how people are consuming streaming content? Who's sort of winning the, streaming wars?
Yeah, I wish I did again. You're going to be glad you're asking me these questions, Chris. We didn't ask anything specific to anything beyond the general, the general genre of, but it would be a good thing to explore for sure.
Yeah, we're actually going to be
came up. Yeah,
that was a setup for a comment. We're going to be looking more closely at the whole streaming area. So our team at Odyssey Studio does a lot of work in this space, and so it's a very fast changing map. And we've seen just in the last week or two with the merger of Warner and Discovery Channel that there's a lot of activity in terms of big media companies vying to be in that sort of top 3 or 4 streaming choices. And
Yeah.
so I think, like a lot of areas, the network effect means the bigger going to get bigger and more powerful, and the smaller players are going to be pushed to the side somewhat. But there is clearly a general interest in consuming online video content across other channels as well.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think we've answered all the major questions that have come through. Do you see anything else, Lauren, that we need to address?
Nope, I think you covered them all.
Very good. So, well, with that, we'll just highlight again, please join us for the Rise of Value-Based Marketing, which will be looking at how to tell the story of your destination and the very special people, places, experiences that are particularly important today and moving forward across all parts of your communities. That is on April the 20th. Please sign up for that. And please, we look forward to joining you at upcoming events over the summer as we all get out and about traveling again and connecting in person. So thank you, Dave, for all your time and effort, and the team at Destination Analysts in pulling this together. Thank you, Lauren, for all your work, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.